We are live. Got to turn the volume down so I don't hear it there. We are live. Final Cut Pro Radio TV. We're going to be talking about the next version of Final Cut Pro 10, which is probably, not for sure, but probably going to be released next week at the FCPX Creative Summit. So we've had a lot of requests this week from both Twitter and Facebook. I'm going to run down a list real quick, and then we're going to talk about them. So these are top requests that I've gotten repeatedly. Audio enhancements, including a mixer. Dupe detection. I'm going to go to the hospital if he doesn't get that. Option. This is one that I could have used last week. Browser folder for events. I was kind of surprised I couldn't put events in folders. That was pretty interesting. Final Cut Pro 10 on the iPad Pro. Multiple timeline improvements. This is an interesting one. Change role by dragging a clip to a different lane. I like that one. Rename masks, effects, and color corrections. Open compound clips in place. Better keyframing controls, reveal title and effects from the timeline to the browser, and probably the number one is collaboration.
So raise your hand if you don't want all of those.
Well, exactly. Let's go around. I'm going to introduce everybody one at a time according to what they are on my screen. So first is Mr. Bill Davis. Say hi, Bill.
Hi, Bill.
There you go.
Good to be back again. It's been a long time since I've done a chat, and I missed them.
Absolutely. Then we have Mr. Brett Olson, Mr. Off the Tracks.
Hello.
Serena Catania. She's going to be a speaker at the FCPX Creative Summit. Hi, Serena.
Thanks to you guys. I'm trying to fix my sound here. Bear with me a second.
We'll give you a minute.
Oh, you sound great.
Of course,
Hey, we hear you
Mr. Raw Patrick Southern from LumaForge.
That's me. Wait, what did you call him?
Mr. Raw, because he's
like raw sushi, kind of raw.
No, like the raw, like ProRes Raw. Mr. ProRes Raw.
We're going to assume it was about food and not anything else.
Exactly.
Are we going to get Philip on?
Yeah, well, yeah. I asked you to invite him for sure.
Yeah, let me text him.
Okay. The link, that's fine.
If he can join us, he'll join in.
Sorry, I just derailed your introductions.
Okay.
Normal
And we have Mr. T from is it New Mexico?
From Albuquerque, New Mexico, yes.
Albuquerque, New Mexico, T. Payton.
Where all the new
How about that?
Are.
How about that? We got a great lineup today, and we're trying to get one or two more on here. So we had the announcement this morning that the keynote speaker is going to be iJustine, who apparently is a Final Cut Pro user.
That she is, and she's got, I think, over 5 million subscribers on her YouTube channel, which is, if you think about it, kind of insane.
That's a lot.
Yeah. That's more than most cable channels get.
That's more subscribers than copies of Final Cut Pro 10 available or out there. So
that's absolutely true. Yeah. That's absolutely true. So she's the keynote. We're going to be at some supper club out there Friday, and she's going to be doing the keynote there. But I have some other announcement, a good announcement about Armadillo Willie's.
What?
A good announcement.
That's the most important thing.
It is. It absolutely is.
Oh, come on.
Since LumaForge has stepped up to the plate and says Armadillo Willie's is not available, we're going to have Jellyfish Willie's barbecue. Look at that. Look at that great shot Patrick's doing. He's filming right there.
You're barbecuing with a flamethrower?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but...
Yeah, T had asked what Mr. Raw meant. What he didn't understand is that we take raw meats and we cook them with the flamethrower and Jellyfish Willie's. There,
Jellyfish Willie's. Thank you, LumaForge. You guys are great. You are the best stepping up to the plate for that stuff.
Surf and turf.
Oh man.
So Tony Gallardo's watching. I'm going to send. Yes.
Why isn't he on here?
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah,
room.
Tony.
What does the chat do now? 10? Is it still 10, or have they broken the 10 barrier?
I think 10 would be more than enough, don't you guys?
Well, didn't at one point Apple was talking about revamping FaceTime, and FaceTime was going to do something like 3 dozen. I just wanted to see all those little stacked up.
Yeah, the FaceTime update actually came out like 2 days ago, I think. My phone is currently telling me to update to iOS 12.1 that introduces group FaceTime and adds over 70 new emoji, which I think is probably
That's the more important feature update.
Right. Is there an Armadillo Willie's emoji?
I hope so.
I'm emailing Philip the link right now. I didn't get it. I apologize till the last minute. Anyway, I sent it to him.
Good.
So Alex Gollner wants to join. I'm going to send him the link.
Totally.
This is a hangout. This is a party.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I've got a red Solo cup, so we're official.
It is officially a party.
I'm drinking out of my coffee cup that the family in Peru gave me after we survived the Amazon.
We're international.
So Serena, I had a list right before you came on. I had a list of some requests for Final Cut Pro, whatever version. We can presume there's going to be a version coming out next week based on precedent the last 2 years. Didn't do a version 1, right? Didn't do it when they had that first one in June.
I don't think we got one at the first Creative Summit. I'm trying to remember.
Right.
No.
But they spoiled us with the last 2.
Right.
So we got 10.3 and 10.4, so it seems like 10.5 should be a no-brainer.
Last year it was previewed. It wasn't released.
Right. But we were allowed to talk about it.
Yep.
When you just think about how Apple does these kind of announcements and marketing now, I mean, the things have changed. It used to be NAB, and now we do have these separate kind of pods of conferences for the various software. So I think that all leads me to think there's a really good chance we'll see something. Or you guys will see something up in Cupertino.
It's Alex.
It's Alex.
Sure.
Hello.
Hey, Alex, what's up?
Fine. I just need to obviously turn my camera on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Cool. Okay.
I like how the picture looks, actually.
Let's just leave it there.
Yeah, it makes me. This is what I really look like, sadly. I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. It says turn camera off. No, can you see me? Oh, you can see me.
No,
we get a picture.
We see Alex's younger brother.
Sorry for derailing you. It's weird. I got the green light on that says the camera's on, but and yeah, I guess I need.
And you're just breaking it.
Sorry,
you're just breaking it.
Either that or Alex has turned into a floating head.
Oh, ethereal.
We need somebody to animate his head.
So who thinks we're going to see 10.5 next week?
Oh, totes.
Yeah.
That's totally.
I do. I think so.
I have to abstain. You guys are braver than I am.
Whether it's actually going to be released, I think is a different story. But
Right.
I think it will be previewed at least.
I agree. I think they'll say, sometime in 2019, maybe early 2019, which is only 6 weeks away. Once we hit Thanksgiving. So
I think it depends how big it is. I mean, if we get collaboration, for example,
right.
Then if they need a few more weeks to mess with it, that's cool. But
so T, how do you see collaboration in Final Cut Pro 10? I mean, the forthcoming, not what we do now.
how do
you see perhaps them implementing it? Yeah.
Wow. I can think of a lot of cool ways it should work.
The Apple way, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the simplest things to do is just let two people have a library open at the same time. But I think that what I would hope would happen is we would not just have local collaboration, but we'd have cloud-based collaboration. So we could do things like have a library open across, a cloud network, and then have shared like cloud proxies that are really low res that let us be able to work collaboratively over a long distance. I would love to see that. I mean, but I think it really just depends on what Apple's trying to do with Final Cut. One thing I think it's hard is all of the look at Blackmagic. Blackmagic just wants it bad. They just want to win. I'm really kind of surprised they just haven't purchased Avid, because it's only like $200 million. I mean, it's not a big deal for them to buy that. So but anyway, I just think the frequency of updates that Blackmagic is doing and the way they're pushing things so fast, even Adobe is doing that as well. It seems like if you want to live in the space where collaboration is really going to matter, then I think Apple needs to really step up to the plate and give us a fantastic collaboration that is no-brainer to set up. Unlike the Blackmagic system that is quite difficult to set up. Well, Patrick can answer to that, but
it's quite difficult to set up.
Yeah, and just have a no-brainer system that is you're able to collaborate would be absolutely fantastic. So anyway, I could go on and on and on, but I think
I'm trying to imagine the dark post-apocalyptic landscape if Avid were to be bought out by Blackmagic. In the guys that I know who are Avid editors right now, it would be the most interesting discussions on the web that you have ever seen.
Well, you called it a discussion. I'd have a different word for it. There's no mingling of the NLEs very much. People just don't like that.
And the Avid guys have such pressure and weight on them to just keep things. I mean, those are huge workflows. There's billions of dollars on the line in Avid workflows. And to suddenly have the idea that somebody would come in with a different orientation and impose any part of their will on the Avid ecosystem would, I think, freak people out.
So, Patrick, you said it's difficult. Why is it difficult to use the Blackmagic version of collaboration? What's difficult about it?
Okay, so first you have to set up a Postgres SQL database, right? That's
enough. That's plenty.
And you lost me.
Don't have to go any further. You lost me right there. Okay. So what do you
still have 3 listeners available for us?
Yeah.
Keep going. You're saying.
So Patrick, what do you think? So an easier way, I mean, I know LumaForge is involved with, collaboration with Jellyfish and their products. So how could Apple make it easy for people?
They could not require a Postgres SQL database.
Okay, that would be one.
They'd have to find a way of making it so that Final Cut Pro doesn't use the current database system. Because that current database system that the Final Cut Pro has been using since 2011 isn't really good for libraries. It's hard to share at a database record level. So they may have to change the actual database that they use. Is
that the SQLite underpinnings, Alex?
Yeah.
So Alex, what does like Avid use and Premiere use and Resolve? What do they use?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think they either of the. They don't probably use actual database systems. They probably just use files that are on disk. Certainly, in the case of Avid, it's almost like bin locking was by accident because that's what their file just was more about locking directories, and they happen to store stuff in directories, and their de facto database is just the file structure that was around in 1992 in Windows or on the Mac. So they got. It's almost like it was the actual NetWare, if you remember Novell NetWare type directory sharing that by mistake got them to be able to share their stuff, I think. So I think they lucked into it. Whereas I think in the case of Final Cut Pro, they chose a specific database. For some reason, they didn't choose a database that is very good for multiple people accessing the same information.
So it doesn't seem like that Final Cut Pro was concerned about collaboration when they started.
Well, back in July 2011, I found user interface elements saying this item has a guard from a different user. And that was in a dialog box text that was in there in July 2011. So I think they were thinking about it a lot back then. I mean, so maybe they actually got rid of that plan, or they, obviously, I think they've been thinking about multi-user since before the first release, 8.5 years ago. So yeah.
Here's a question about the current database. Is the limitation that more than like 2 people can't write to the database at the same time, or would there be any problem with them opening it up for read only? Like, if one person has permission to write to the library, would it be possible for somebody else to just read it without screwing up the underpinnings?
And that's a Chris Hocking question. It's just that if you look at the different kinds of lightweight databases that you can store your app's database worth of information in, the pros and cons of the FileMaker, the one that we're using, Final Cut Pro, I should say, Final Cut Pro, is that it's very fast and lightweight, but it means that it's rather hard to have 2 people accessing either part of the database. It's more about getting access to individual files and records and stuff like that. I mean, obviously, Final Cut Pro libraries are directories as well, but the actual database part, I think it's a possible limitation that maybe, there could be a point release of Final Cut Pro that doesn't seem to do anything different from our point of view, but it could use a completely different database.
Right.
Something else in the future.
So it'd be just like when we updated our from to 10.1 and we had to update all our libraries. We'd probably have to do that again.
Yeah.
With the new version. I think Philip said that on the last one of these is that they would have to change the library database.
Yeah. Do you think that's coming, Patrick?
Patrick?
I have no idea.
Cue the cricket sound effect.
Actually,
come on, Patrick. We know you have an NDA from Apple.
How many of us are going to the summit? How many of all of you guys are going to the summit? Will I see you there?
A few of us.
I can't make it. I've got work on Thursday, and I've had work on Thursday booked for the last 6 months, which meant that if I'm working until the evening on Thursday, I can't really get on a flight that gets to California in time for me until the following evening at 6 o'clock, which would be a bit of a pity to miss that day.
And that's scary, though, because if Alex is not on a plane, then they can't ship updates.
Yeah, that's true.
It's true.
Well,
that's the history and tradition.
Well, I'll go on a short car journey, which means maybe you'll get a point release. But point release,
just go into the loo and stay there for a few hours. That'll fake it out.
But yeah, I just had to turn my phone off for a while. Yeah, I mean, the thing. But a point release earlier this year, just what we call a point release, got us ProRes RAW and captions.
Yeah,
it's not nothing, and also. Sharing with that actually pays attention to what roles you've got visible. I mean, those are amazing, and that was just 10.4.1. So it's more maybe it's more what happens when the release happens is you go, okay, what's the general theme of this release? Is this release about work groups? Or is it about encouraging more YouTubers to come to Final Cut Pro? Or is it about people integrating with graphics? Or is it about integrating with third parties? What is it all about? And then there'll be other features, but there'll be one little thing I'll go, I think this is what the theme of this one is.
So Patrick,
yeah.
What about proxy workflow with Final Cut? How do you see them doing something better with that? Because right now, you create proxies and that's it. Without using a hack or a third party, you can't do anything with them. If they get unlinked, you can't relink them. So
yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things that they could and should do, I feel like, with proxies, one of the biggest things that I've always wanted to do, and that I think a lot of us would all want to do, is be able to generate proxies while working at a an office, and then be able to take a drive with proxies and the associated audio and do kind of like an offline workflow from home or from the beach or from the woods or wherever your preferred off-site location is to edit, and then come back and link back to all of the original media without having to do all these different workarounds. So I think that if they were to take an approach to look at proxies and say, hey, what are some ways that we can make offsite editorial a lot easier, I think that would be largely helpful. And I think giving us options beyond just ProRes proxy at whatever resolution, I think if we had the ability to be a little bit more specific about what codec we have with our proxy footage, if there are any camera LUTs baked in, any of that sort of a thing, I think would be very helpful.
Absolutely. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard. I mean, we can relink optimized media right now and original media, but we can't relink proxy media. So that doesn't seem like that would be that difficult to do. Even if an outside app made the proxies, we should be able to relink to those if we wanted to.
It's strange because inside it's only looking for the file name quite a lot of the time. So if you actually make your own proxies and stick them in the library, it'll actually use your proxies with burnt-in stuff if you like. But yeah, I mean, I think I'd like a new flavor of ProRes proxy. So it would be ProRes proxy 4224. Because then we can have transparency in a relatively low.
Oh my gosh!
You want proxy with alpha channel.
Yeah, imagine that. I mean, or as we're living in the late part of this decade, maybe we actually don't want an alpha channel; we want a depth channel.
Oh,
proxy. Yeah.
Oh my goodness!
Welcome to facial recognition across inside your software.
So one thing I do think is coming. Oh, sorry to interrupt. One thing I really do think is coming is a good prediction. Is that just better third-party plugin support and allowing the plugins to do more. It just seems like, Frame.io had a release that they're releasing something at the summit, and the thing that you really need with Frame.io is you need to be able to control the timeline from a plugin. And right now, I don't think that's capable at all. But boy, you look at what Simon and the guys did at Motion VFX with MO2. It's just amazing.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. But, have any of you guys used MO2?
Oh, dude. Yeah. It's awesome. It is unbelievable.
I great code.
At it.
Yeah. I thought, back in the early days of my career, back in the Linotronic days when we were doing print stuff, you used to have to go to a shop to get anything printed because we didn't all have laser printers and stuff like that. I'm wondering if at some point they could break through some of this stuff by doing that same kind of thing as upload stations. Wouldn't it be awesome to just have little things that are like an Alpha Graphics kind of thing or a print shop kind of thing where you could take your field footage and then it would keep whatever encryption you created with it on your camera or in your laptop, and then just put it on a fat pipe up and give you the proxies, and you could get on the plane and go back home. And by the time you got home, all that hard to upload stuff was just there.
Well, the problem is always the pipe.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Make it a pipe is a place that you go to and drop off a secure disk, and then the service uploads it on something bigger. They could have 10 T1 lines or whatever the current modern equivalent is in the back room, tossing stuff up to servers.
Like an local Amazon at a mini mall or something.
I mean, even speaking of Frame.io, Frame.io could do all this stuff. You think about it, Frame.io actually makes proxies as you upload. So imagine if you, all you need is a Frame.io in like Los Angeles and New York and just a few places.
Right. And Albuquerque, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Absolutely.
Do their own.
Isn't when they got that huge venture capital round at Frame.io, I thought they said that a big chunk of it was going to go to security, the end-to-end type of security that a movie studio wants in order to allow their bits to go up in the cloud.
Yeah, so and they recently got MPAA certified too, didn't they?
Right, they did, yeah. So they can do Hollywood movies up and down with the kind of security that means that they're not going to get pirated. So I think that's a huge step evolutionarily.
So
now that we've got the proxy workflow solved for the team,
right here, right today.
What about dupe detection? That's, I got to do something with Sean Lander. He's going to end up in the hospital if we don't get dupe detection.
He's on a plane to come with a baseball bat to the Cricket Summit, probably.
That doesn't seem like that would be that difficult to do.
Well, I mean, right now you can go into the timeline index and type in the name of a clip and see how many copies of that clip are in the timeline.
But it isn't the same as the same frames. You need to know what frames are used.
I mean, that's a fair point.
I think from the point of view of it's not the technical problem; it's a user interface problem. Okay. How do you do dupe detection and show what frames are duplicated without scaring people who have only just introduced themselves to editing? And I think the idea of putting 2 copies of a clip or 2 parts of the same clip and then the actual timeline lighting up with weird colors is a thing that will make people. It's not discoverable to know what the problem is. You'd just be looking, oh, there's green everywhere or red everywhere. Oh, there's red stripes. What does the red stripes mean? Does that mean it's not rendered? How come it keeps on changing? I keep on dragging the end of one clip. In other words, it's a problem to do with not worrying and confusing people who don't know what's going on. So I think
that's a good point. Yeah.
I think Final Cut Pro 7 dupe detection with the actual timeline showing stuff is really unlikely. But as I usually respond when people talk about dupe detection, I think it should go in the timeline index. And the idea would be you have a special live keyword for the timeline index that says, okay, clips only used once, parts of footage that's used twice or 3 times or 17 times. It doesn't matter. You can have any number you want, which would be cool.
Make it a filtering in the timeline.
Exactly. Yeah. So then what happens is you just go to that thing, go to used twice in the timeline or 3 times in the timeline, and you click that and everything else gets deselected, and then you can see what you've used more than once. Then the cool bit is, what about footage that's used in a different timeline? Show me which footage that I've used in my timeline that it's also used in this project or projects with this keyword. And then what happens is, if you're doing stuff which you actually want to use more than once or you don't want to use more than once, then you can go, oh, did I use this in part 1? Oh, maybe. Then what you're doing is did I use it in different people have timelines, right? And you have double length reels. You want to say, okay, I want dupe detection across a set of timelines. And then and I think the timeline index is the place for that, because then you can choose loads of different settings for what the dupe detection. So instead of saying, I think the trick with all these features is to go, okay, instead of asking for what we had in Final Cut Pro 7, what can we do now that is Final Cut Pro 10? And Final Cut Pro 10 is all about, okay, dupe detection across with keywords or whatever. So I think it's about introducing that in a way that it's there when you need it, but doesn't get in the way when you don't know what's going on, and it just looks weird.
So am I hearing classes of ranges?
So it'll actually just highlight. You will get effectively what you'd be getting is the range tool will be selecting all this media with media range highlights maybe on the bits of the ranges which are used more than once or something like that. Maybe.
Serena, what were you going to say?
Well, there are some. I'm wondering if that solution might not come from an external company like a Shotput Pro or a Hedge that are already doing checksum verifications on your media. Maybe they have the ability to somehow interface with us. I'm just trying to think out of the box here and find a solution for us. I know that you can send your media through those services and it will tell you where the differences are, because it could be the same exact timing. It could look exactly the same, but you don't know if maybe one frame was colored or so. Maybe that's a way to do it.
You could even do an amazing service in which what it did was it looked at all your footage and it actually showed you dupe frames, not because they had the same frame number or they're from the same clip. It's like we've got 7 clips with the same frame in, and it turns out that they were being used more than once because of the way these have been imported 3 times, or for whatever reason, you suddenly end up with lots of different clips and different versions all in the same library. And I've used clips with 3 different names and different time codes, but oddly enough, they are actually the same frames. And then a third party will be able to go use a bit of Amazon image recognition to go, oh, these frames are actually the same as those frames. That would be amazing. Get a bit of AI in there to do real dupe detection.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Well, I think the thing Sean's looking for is just really simple.
I know.
Well, but I agree 100% with Alex that I think that's a big problem with a lot of veterans editors who are used to the Final Cut Classic, is like, why doesn't it just do it because 7 did it this way? And I agree that it has to be done in a Final Cut 10 sort of way. Apple doesn't approach this as let's rebuild what we already built. They're trying to build on something new. And I think the timeline index solution is great. The other thing I was going to say is used media ranges is not on by default. So there are things like dupe detection that might be scary to a new user that doesn't have to be. It can be something that you check on or off as the user. So a new user opening it up may not even ever know that that's there.
So I know one thing, another request, top request is working with raw stuff in Final Cut Pro 10. Number one is ProRes RAW. So Patrick, what kind of controls are we looking for that are not there now in Final Cut for ProRes RAW?
Yeah, so the big thing that people are upset is not there are metadata controls, right? So we do have that information coming from the camera, things like ISO and white balance. And obviously, once you've got the footage in the timeline, you can still grade it. You know, you've got a white balance control and a tint control, and you can change exposure. So those aren't issues in terms of having control over the actual exposure and so forth. But, you know, something that Red Footage does and that Blackmagic RAW does is give you the ability to select an ISO and a white balance, and it follows that clip around from application to application to application. So something that would be amazing if it existed with ProRes RAW is the ability to change your ISO or your white balance. If, for example, I don't know if you guys are ever out and about and don't have time to change white balance every time you change from one room with multiple different sorts of lights to another room with multiple sorts of lights to outside to inside. If you're running guns, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to change white balance as often as the camera would need.
Absolutely.
So if there was the ability with ProRes RAW to run and gun shoot and to be able to change your white balance in the browser, and then all of that ripples into the timeline and then into Resolve or to wherever else, which obviously they'd also have to, you know, be supported inside of Resolve for that to work. But once ProRes RAW is able to do something like that, I feel like the adoption rate of ProRes RAW will go up. And as Brad and I have adamantly discussed in the past, you're probably going to need a camera manufacturer like Arri to sign on for ProRes RAW as
Absolutely.
well.
Absolutely.
Or you're going to have an operator that just takes the time to do it right. It doesn't take that long in the field. Although there were times when you are running from room to room and you can't. But I think a lot of that, the onus is on the camera operator.
But ProRes RAW is a capture format, and what you're talking about is changing the metadata that is passed on as a interchange format. So really, what you kind of want to do is say, because ProRes RAW is being used to do the debayering while it's being composited inside Final Cut Pro on top of another clip that's also maybe on ProRes RAW. So that's where stuff is all happening at that point. Now, of course, you can say, okay, at that point, I want you to use a different ISO than it's set in the metadata when I'm doing that compositing. And then, but really what you want is the red type metadata, or the metadata that people like. Essentially, it's a bodge, it's a fake. In other words, people don't know how to do color correction actually using these methods to actually get the results that other people have been doing. I didn't say that. This is not going online, is it? But you see what I mean? I think, hey, that's the way people are using it. But the thing is that maybe what you need is to say, okay, from now on for this clip, when this clip is now passed on, when it's in its new codec, when it's been debayered, when it's ProRes RAW, not ProRes RAW anymore, it's actually ProRes 4444, then the metadata sidecar or whatever it happens to be goes with that from there on. I think this is Apple being very kind of purist about that sort of thing and saying, no. And it's about, once you've debayed, then effectively what you're really doing is something slightly different. Because they don't want to say, once you've done some compositing in Final Cut Pro 10, you can still get access to the source anymore from that point. And I don't think they really necessarily want to support workflows in which ProRes RAW is actually done, is the compositing of ProRes RAW is done by something else with the metadata. They want the NLE, whichever NLE supports ProRes RAW, and it's starting off with Final Cut Pro 10, is doing the partial debayering, and it's actually making those choices. Now, so instead of it being the metadata, what Apple would say is, no, well, okay, we'll give you some effects you can apply to your clips, or we can maybe have cliplet, we can go back to the master clip. Oh, sorry, whatever app that is. We can go to the actual clip and apply an effect to the clip before it's put on the timeline. But then T will tell you, about the problem about metadata flowing that direction. I've already added clips to the timeline. Hey, could you make it so everywhere we use this clip, we've got a slightly different color temperature? Anyway, the direction of metadata was the problem at that point.
Well, it seems just like the way RAW kind of evolved. We have, RAW stills, and then think about just red RAW. Those are just the standards. So until they're able to achieve something that people are used to, it seems like the adoption is going to be just slower, because you're looking for that. You're like, dude, just like Patrick said, hey, where are the controls that are just like red RAW? Because that's what RAW means to them.
Well, yeah, and then part of the holdup, I think, is monitoring. You still don't have displays that can do Rec 2020 that are out there that are easy. So you're trying to do color correction and luminance correction, and you can't really monitor it very well.
Maybe Apple's new display that came out last week, it's got a USB connector on it, it's better for that sort of thing.
Yeah, but that's last
You mean
week,
the
right?
iPad Pro?
Yeah.
but let's be exploratory here for a second. Like the Atomos Sumo 19, it's maybe a little milky for an HDR monitor, but you can at least use it as somewhat of a reference to see what kind of an HDR image you have coming out of Final Cut. There are those LG televisions that are coming down in price, and it's not the same as having the Sony the BVM X300, which is like the standard. But there are lesser cost HDR monitoring options that are available now that can still take advantage of the full dynamic range of ProRes RAW.
You're quite right, but they're new, and it's we don't have them all over the industry at this point. Now, this NAB may see a huge shift in that. Let's see.
Well, okay. Here's something I've been thinking about. Sorry, Bill, to cut you off.
Go ahead.
So right now, if I want to monitor HDR, I have to get something like the AJ 4K IO box, right?
Yep.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what kind of drives me nuts is the Apple TV can actually play out HDR, and I was kind of disappointed that when they talked about the Mac Mini, that the HDMI on the Mac Mini wasn't an HDR output. Yeah, and I don't know what the limitations or reasons, but I think it has to be. Is it HD? What's the spec? 2.0 A or B or something?
Well, it's on 2.1 right now. I think the Mac Mini, right?
That's 2.0.
2.0.
Yeah, it's 2.0 the Mac Mini. That's the problem, I think. I got the impression it was 2.1 that needed the HDR.
Yeah, and they have it on the Apple TV, and that's a tiny box. So what's the holdup? That would be huge if I could hook up to an LG OLED straight from my Mac Mini and be monitoring HDR. That's democratization of HDR. And I find it hilarious that a year ago they announced that Final Cut Pro 10 can do HDR, but there's no affordable solution. Final Cut Pro 10 is only $299, and there's no affordable solution to monitor it. So,
that's
the hardware, guys.
You don't have $23,000 for a Flanders monitor?
Oh my gosh! I looked it up, Brad. It's HDMI 2.0B that you need for HDR. 2.0B. Or 2.1. Well, 2.1 supports 8K. It's not. With HDR. So if you want to do 8K HDR, then you need to do the HDMI 2.1.
Well, at least 2.0B should have been on the Mac Mini, in my humble opinion.
Well, what about Thunderbolt 3? That doesn't support HDR?
Not that I know of. It's using DisplayPort technology to do displays, right?
Well. I think it's 40 gigabits per second, so I think the actual theoretical bandwidth of Thunderbolt 3 can do it, but it's a matter of whether there's an overhead.
Which is why you need something like the AJA box.
Yeah, well, and the AJA box is also injecting metadata in the signal so that whenever it reaches a television or a monitor, it knows what kind of a signal it is.
Handshake.
Yeah. Guys, I have to head out. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, Patrick. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you guys next week at Armadillo. No, Jellyfish Willie's. Jellyfish Willie's.
No, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Before you go, I'll pull that back up again so everybody knows. Where is that? This is what's going to happen next week.
We can't see you, Richard.
No, I saw that. I saw it momentarily.
Here we go. Jellyfish Willie's Barbecue. LumaForge is stepping up to the plate once again. They are the best company, I'm telling you. Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, sure thing. Can I mention just real quick what that photo is actually about?
Yes, you can.
Yeah,
It's
fire.
It's about you should come to my session on Saturday. I believe it's the Saturday session where we're talking about things that are raw, like pork ribs.
So maybe some stupid raisin cookies, you could actually burn them raw. Burn them.
I thought you were doing your Elon Musk flamethrower impersonation.
Right, cooking with flamethrowers.
Serena, that is the Elon Musk flamethrower, and
Is it?
it is. And we were shooting in multiple flavors of log and raw, and so I'll be doing a session on log and raw inside of Final Cut Pro 10. So if you want to see a bunch of fun flamethrower footage, even if you already know everything you need to know about raw and log, the flamethrower is still a lot of fun. So you should come check out that
speaking
session.
of that, for the lots of people who are going to see this who can't go, the sessions, are they recording? Is there any hope of we'll see something on the back end?
No. The idea with Future Media Concepts is they put on these live events, and the idea that they're going to record them for later use doesn't make sense for their live events.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they're trying to. It's kind of like a pay to be there to see the content that nobody else gets to see kind of a situation.
That being said, if Patrick wanted to make his own little video later on it, nothing would really stop him from doing it.
Well, I did record the Tips and Tricks show last year with their permission. I still have that. But, it hasn't been published, of course.
Well, that's a fair point.
So the answer is no.
So Patrick, guess what they did? The worst thing, they programmed my session right at the same time as yours.
No!
I know. I think I'm going to be in there by myself.
No.
Serena, run out and buy like butane torches or something. Serena, get fire with fire literally this time.
Serena,
go grab some grenades. We're going to do a live feed from your room to my room, and we're just going to do it.
That's not fair.
Okay. It's okay.
That's not fair.
Is anybody aware that, Patrick, I'm presenting?
Yes, I'm aware you're presenting. And actually, Brad, I do want to come to your session because I would love to know a lot more about self-distributing.
Self-distributing, specifically self-publishing to iTunes. So it's that specific workflow. And
well, that's just a one-click button, isn't it, Brad? You click it
no
from your phone. You can do it from your phone.
It's just like publishing. It's just like publishing to YouTube.
One click.
Publish
to
iTunes. Yeah.
No, I'm looking forward to that one. I actually could use an update on that.
So, Serena, what's your session about?
My session is about how to keep your business going. It's like we edit, now what? So it's basically on the business side of how to get clients, keep them, learn from the past, enjoy the present, and look towards the future. So hopefully people will leave with a better ability to make some money and be prosperous and still have a great time.
I'm going to tell you the best note or the best bit of feedback I ever got from a client. And I don't think anyone's going to beat this. Okay.
Yeah.
It was when I was designing conferences. So I was designing the whole big conference for someone, and I did this branding, and I showed it to the client, and she said, "I don't like it, but you're a designer. I trust you. We'll go for it."
Wow.
And then 3 weeks later, she said, "I really like it now." So
those are the best clients that trust you and let you do what you are hired to do. That's part of it.
And I know,
how to get them to trust you. Because that's the hardest part, is getting them to trust you.
Yeah, she knew she wasn't a designer. And she just knew that I was. So anyway, sorry.
That's awesome. Congrats on that one. That's awesome.
Hey, I wanted to bring up something about the metadata workflow as far as color correction. I don't know if you guys have played with Denver Riddle's Cinema Grade.
I have it.
Oh,
I haven't played with it yet.
So I haven't got a chance to really dive into it, but it is so cool. It's an external app that you actually do all your color correction in, and then you just apply it back to all the clips that you have the plugin enabled on it. And wow, it's just phenomenal opportunity to see how in the world, well, one, how in the world did they do that? Did they get it so Final Cut would be reading the metadata changes for their color, and it's on something external. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for looking back at RAW to be able to have maybe even I'm just making this up, it's never going to happen, but you could have like a RAW editor that could be talking about collaboration, that you could color correct outside of Final Cut, and then editing could happen, and then all the color changes and stuff would just ripple in and be there as soon as the colorist hits save.
So it's like a different DaVinci room, isn't it? It's like a resolved room in which it's a completely separate app, and then with an open database from Final Cut Pro that is just on. Hey, if it's just on a new Mac Pro and just whoever's connected to it get access to it. I mean, obviously not great news for the guy who just left, but anyway, we could have just like, hey, then. But what I'm saying is, yes, the idea is that the fact that that Denver Riddle's app can have access to, essentially, the app is saying, hey, I'll do the color for this clip. Just trust me, and it'll overlay it based on some information some text files it's probably leaving on the drive somewhere. But that's really clever. And it's
well, and so what you do is you have to apply the effect to all the clips first. But you just select all your clips and double click and bloop, it's there. And then once you go into the grading app, all the groups are there. You can do whatever you want to organize it. And it's really clever too, is because he made it work across multiple platforms. You can have someone that's just really good at editing in Cinema Grade, and they don't care what your NLE is. They're like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. And then all the changes get actually baked back into your NLE. So you're just exporting out of there instead of exporting out of Cinema Grade. Anyway, I just thought it was brilliant. And I wonder if Apple gave them a little more, access with their plugin, or they're just simply, the fact it's a plugin, it's just a plugin using something externally, with text files or whatever.
And do those kinds of color corrections. Can you then open it up in the Final Cut color tools and retweak things?
You can't retweak it, but you can add to it. So it's just an effect.
So it's an overlay. Okay.
I think actually what happens is that it creates a LUT on the, I think Cinema Grade is actually creating a LUT.
That's interesting.
It's applying that LUT. Denver talked about the fact of how Color Finale was able to basically collapse all the layers that it had of color correction together. And I think they're using the same kind of thing in Cinema Grade.
It's logical.
Denver sent an email out this morning saying he's got a big announcement on Tuesday about it. So we'll look forward to that.
Oh, great. That's great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry to go. I wanted to go back to just the MO2 from Motion VFX. So talk about, it's kind of funny. the things I'm really excited about Final Cut right now are the third-party stuff, because MO2 is just ridiculous. So I have an older machine. I have a 2013 iMac, and we were here working on a presentation for a client, pulled in a 3D model, and we're manipulating the 3D model in real time, playing back in real time at 1080. And it's not skipping a beat at all. We're adding lighting effects and things like that. And it's like, it just keeps playing and playing and playing, moving it around to make sure it doesn't interact with some text on screen. And it's just shocking to be able to do this inside an NLE. And I had a friend come over and I showed him this, and he teaches at the university here. And he was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. He's like, is this Final Cut 10 only? I'm like, yeah, it is. He's like, oh, darn. So anyway, I hope that Apple can see the phenomenal work that's being done, and would open up to things like having better transcription availability, so that we could have a transcription app be able to find dialogue or whatever.
But you have that. You have that already. You have that with Builder. Builder has the ability to work with transcriptions right within Final Cut. It's awesome. Through Lumberjack system.
Yeah, so what I meant was the kind of the thing that wow, is it Digital Anarchy that has the thing for Premiere? I forget the name.
Transcriptive.
Is that transcriptive? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just that with their third-party panel integration that Adobe's allowed, and they also allow the timeline to be controlled and the playhead to be controlled by the plugin. Or by
I think though you're hitting on some design philosophies that clash with Apple's end-to-end control, because I think their fear is if they have like a thing like an Adobe panel. Because I've thought about it too, like Frame.io having a panel in Premiere is really cool, and I wish that Final Cut had that as well. But I think it clashes with their philosophy of there being some control. And if the app crashes while using some of these plugins, sometimes people blame the app, which it happens anyway. But I think they don't. I don't know. I think they're control freaks a little too much.
Have you seen MO2? Have you used it?
Yeah, but MO2 is just like Cinema Grade in a way. It's a different interface within Motion, so it's not.
It's in Final Cut.
Right, but it's not actually like it's a when you're looking in Motion, it's a layer, right? It's just a layer. Like I can't roll open in the Motion timeline or whatever, what is that called, the little project view or whatever. I can't roll open the elements, so I've got the plugin layer, and I click on that, and now I'm in their interface, even though it's in the window. It's like its own. In a way, I know it doesn't launch into a separate app, but MO2 is essentially a different program plugin in Motion.
Well, I'm sorry. What I meant was that it has its own interface. It doesn't have the interface limitations that we typically see in a plugin, like a Motion template. As far as the controls. I mean, they have their own. They've taken over the viewer. They've taken over the the plugin.
That's similar to like CoreMelt stuff too, though, right? Because if you're in CoreMelt, you can still keyframe and.
It is way. It is far above what CoreMelt is doing.
But I'm just talking about the actual interface controls, because I actually use MO2 quite a bit. But it's showing you in the viewer their own little, but it's in the viewer overlay. So it's not like they're manipulating the Motion menus.
Well, all I think Apple needs to do is just allow third parties to be able to control the playhead and open up a individual project.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to happen though.
That has to come with Frame.io.
I'm not getting. I guess I'm not getting exactly what you're saying, because Builder does that. The Lumberjack system Builder. Brad, you've used Builder. I mean,
I haven't used Builder, but I've seen the demo.
Yeah, you know what? Mark Spencer is going to be doing a session on. I'm looking up the time here. From 2:30 to. I think he's
transcriptive.
No. He's using Builder as well. He's going to show how to do text-based editing using Builder and SpeedScriber, because the two are combined. And I'm telling you, it is so powerful, because I'm working on some pretty complicated projects with multiple interviews within an hour and a half. One is an hour and a half long documentary, and the other is a series of individual short pieces. And I use Builder for everything.
But I think that
I'm not understanding. Maybe I'm not understanding.
Builder is a separate application that uses XML to get the stuff into Final Cut, right?
Right.
So it's its own interface, its own standard. What T's talking about is applications that integrate right within Final Cut Pro.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that's the difference.
So this is back to a couple more of the requests that I've gotten. There's two that have to do with the browser. Which number one is rename or have folders for events. I didn't realize that you couldn't make folders for events until this last week.
Wait, sorry, folders like in the library, you make a folder and put events in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have dozens of events, and they're all single stack.
Make a new library.
No, these are all the same library, the same project. I'm not going to
make a new library. Put those events in another library. Done.
No,
I don't know.
This is all the same documentary. I'm not going to do that. It's ridiculous. Well, the other thing is
to be upset.
Yeah. The other thing is rename masks, effect, and color correction. Boy, that's a big one.
Oh, totally. Oh,
yes,
totally.
that, yes.
That, yeah, that's awful. We were doing some rotoscoping, and we had like 10 animated masks, and it's like, okay, which one's which? And you don't know until you actually click on it.
Right, absolutely. You know, another big one is open compound clips in place in the timeline.
Yeah.
Like resolve style, like does with the multicam.
Okay, there you go. Better keyframing. I see that as a constant.
You know, when Blackmagic blatantly ripped off the interface in Final Cut 10, they did a fantastic job.
I can't hear anybody all of a sudden.
Oh, sorry.
We can hear you.
I was trying to make a joke.
I can hear you. No, I can hear you too.
I mean,
Maybe it's better we didn't hear that.
They totally copied the Final Cut 10 keyframing system, the way it displayed on a clip and things like that. Anyway, they did a fantastic job because it's just, again, you can change control points, you can train the nodes right there on the graph. Oh, it's great. Apple just needs to look at that. And
for anybody who missed what T was saying, he's talking about how Resolve ripped off Final Cut Pro 10, but they made it better with the keyframing.
But what I mean is that I think that's totally, I agree with that. But I think when somebody says make something better, I just go, well, imagine if I was Apple just going, okay, I think you need a user interface idea and you need some stories to go with it. And then what happens is you tell the story of how things are at the moment and how hard it is because, like, hey, we don't know which mask it is, and we need to, if we could name them all, that means that we could do things so much easier. We can copy mask, somebody else could mask it. So, no, tell a story. If you just say, hey, just make it better, or do collaboration, they just go, okay, well, that's not really useful. It's not useful. If you just say, okay.
Hey, fairly, somebody at Apple probably goes, oh, let's see, there's that line, the dupe detection. Let's put another check mark there. We got a big, long line of check marks. Let's put another one at the end.
Well, I'm assuming most, if not all of us, have had clients, and think about the notes that you get from clients. Sometimes I think it does help to have some context of what you're actually trying to do. So Alex is right. I've written some stuff into Apple, and I always try to come up with a case study of this is what I'm doing now. This is what would make it better.
Like the one I got 2 days ago. Can you make that a nice blue?
Well, that's specific enough, isn't it?
What kind? You want a Wedgwood blue? Do you want a bright blue? Do you want a primary blue? Do you want a desaturated blue?
Serena, you need the Pantone emotional color swatch that does colors by your feeling toward them. This is angry yellow. This is miffed yellow. This is incensed yellow.
Some of the notes that you get from clients, either on your script or your cut, it's hilarious. We should do an episode on just hilarious things our clients have said to us.
Well, I worked for the federal government for 8.5 years. You don't have to tell me about that.
Well, I think the Final Cut team is masterful in taking the input. I mean, I think, just software development teams in general, but it seems like the Final Cut team has done a very good job of taking things, and think about it. They have so many users. And one person says dupe detection, and they're like, "Okay, do we stop everything we're doing to make dupe detection for this one guy?" Totally, I think they should. But I think weighing it all together, it's interesting. I'm on a project now. We have it's a website app with 500,000 users, and to see the requests come in and the issues that come in, being on the other side of it. Is wow, it is really difficult to deal with, and it is slow moving, getting things done and changed. Especially when we actually want to add new features, when we're just worried about taking care of bugs,
right?
Like crazy.
I mean,
Richard, I'm worried we didn't answer your question about the events. I don't want you to leave upset.
No, I'm not upset.
I just say merge events and.
Seriously, how can we help?
Why do you have too many events, Richard? What's
because he's got that huge music project,
right now. I have probably several terabytes of data in this one documentary that I'm doing, and I'm doing each one. I'm transcribing each interview. Their interviews are an hour long, and then I have one interview so I have all the interviews with transcriptions, and I like to put all that one person into a folder. I use events a lot. I divide my stuff up quite a bit.
Well, you're not using, because you can put keywords into folders.
I need to say something about this, because for the past couple of months, I've had a little side project. And the side project, I've been interviewing some people online around the world about how they use keywords and how they organize their Final Cut Pro 10 things. And it has been a mind-blowing experience to talk to people all over the world about what they do that are similar and what they do that is different and what they do that I never even imagined somebody would try to do. And I'm trying to get a real broad survey, but the breadth of the strategies, the strategic way people approach keywording, the use of markers, the use of the browser, the use of just how they organize their Final Cut Pro 10 world is breathtaking. It's just breathtaking. Well, there are some similarities. There's some, but the scope of this is freakish.
Well, I think that highlights the power of keywording, A. And B, I think that's why collaboration, I think Final Cut collaboration needs to be like that. Unlike, Avid bin locking, which kind of works in one scenario. I think collaboration needs to be very open and fluid like that as well. And then I was going to hit back on another thing. I don't think the problem is that events can't go into folders. I think the problem is that you can't match back to keywords and smart collections when you're matching back from the timeline. That's the problem I have. Otherwise, I would use much less. I'd use far fewer events. Like, for example, when I'm doing a narrative feature film, I have an event per scene. And if you've got 150 scenes, that's a lot of events. If I could match back to keywords, I probably wouldn't make as many events on a narrative film.
But I agree with you 100%, Brad, but that's the way you've structured your keyword usage and your event usage. There are people who use them entirely different, and
right.
I've looked at their event structures. They've been kind enough to share captures, and I'm going, what the heck did you do there?
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's 7 years into 10, and I don't even understand what this guy did.
By the way, both Philip and Greg are going to be at the summit, and they are anxious to sit down with anybody. And Richard, I think it would be great if we could all get together while you're there and compare notes with you. And because they have said very openly, anybody that wants to meet with them about their projects or how to manage keywords, and Philip is the king of metadata. So if you want any kind of collaboration, he and Greg and I will sit down with you, and we can talk about it and trade notes. I'm just opening that up to you guys. And
so the idea of the folders for events, they already have folders in the browser, just they don't include events. That wasn't my item. Somebody else suggested that on Twitter or Facebook, and I liked it because I could have used that. But here's another thing that always pops up on these lists. Final Cut Pro 10 on an iPad Pro. What do you guys think about that?
I think they just need to beef up iMovie and allow us to import Final Cut projects into iMovie, and I'd be happy.
Well, you can do that now.
Well, essentially, that would mean a new proxy.
No, you can.
Workflow.
You can't go. You can't. Sorry.
You see, you need proxy distribution via networks in order to really do iPad. Because essentially, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, because what's the iPad going to be working with? The actual real media? Well, eventually, but it'll take time to actually get the media to that iPad via Wi-Fi or whatever it's to be. So what it means is get your alternate proxy workflows working properly, their distribution, and they're relinking back. That means the iPad Pro will be able to be, because instead of thinking, hey, I want Final Cut Pro to run on my iPad Pro, that would be fantastic. But it's much more like, oh, I want my iPad Pro to be one of this part of this work group that is collaborating in Final Cut Pro 10 with an iMac, with a new Mac Pro as the super boss that's running Final Cut Pro, and then hey, producer or transcriber or whoever or keyword boffin, use the iPad, right, to do this task, which means it's all related to that. It's very obviously us iPad warriors would like to just do it all on our iPad and not to have to carry a heavy computer. But if they want to say, what is the definition of what a pro app is, or how do you collaborate with creative professionals at a pro level on an iPad Pro? What does that actually mean? And that means essentially it's Lightein's philosophy of, okay, we're going to distribute these proxy things. They're going to be just there on a server, on the DIT cart, or whatever it's going to be called, and everyone on an iPad. So the person with the costume is going to want a different timeline from the person who's doing continuity, and the script supervisors who's putting in keywords and stuff like that. So I think, hey, I hope next Friday you get a load of previews and you're all NDA'd and you can't tell anybody, and you'll maybe by mistake hint at it. But I think I'd be surprised if the way of thinking about new features in Final Cut isn't maybe to say a full list of everything that you want to change, because it's not like this list will ever finish. It's not like they're going to run out and they've implemented everything. I think it's more about working out what the wider Apple is doing and what the Final Cut Pro team can do to help the wider Apple. And the Final Cut Pro team includes people making clips. So obviously the Final Cut Pro team is actually going to contribute to the AR glasses as well. I mean, what is motion going to be done? Making graphics for AR overlays and alpha channels and depth channels and stuff like that. It's more about how it fits into the longer timeline of Apple and what the video applications team are doing. And the next big thing is the Mac Pro. I was just going to ask about that. So what does the Mac Mini say about the Mac Pro? Well, at least you know roughly how the Mac Pro is going to be priced. You take whatever configuration that the Mac Mini is and add $1,000, and then you will get the same on your Mac Pro.
Well, that's not bad.
Which is good news. It's actually a really good way of looking at it, because it's not like the Mac Pro is going to be cheaper than the Mac Mini for the same power. So if you've got 64 gigs of, imagine if you did the full Max $4,000 Mac Mini, whatever that processor is, there's probably going to be $500 cheaper than the Mac Pro that does that configuration. It just makes sense, because you just get more for your $500 or $1,000. And then of course the Mac Pro will do a lot more. It's just that they have to, the iMac Pro has to fit in with the iMac, and then the Mac Mini has to be kind of this bit, and then the Mac Pro has to be up here. You can imagine this level of how this all works is based on the pricing of what these processors can do. So the Mac Mini is fantastic news for that, because it really shows that there'll be 512 gigabytes of RAM possibly if you want in your Mac Pro, if you think about the fact that Mac Mini's got 64.
Right. Well, the other thing is, I'm looking forward to whatever version of Final Cut Pro they're going to show next week, but I'm really interested if they're going to show us a sneak peek at the Mac Pro. That's what I'd really like to see.
Well, I hope you don't see it. I hope they actually do a quick release on Tuesday and nothing. That's what I hope for, because I'm not going to be there.
Oh, you should be there. You should be presenting, Alex. I wish you were coming.
Thank you. I do enjoy it. I mean, I get nervous, but then I do enjoy the actual presenting part and meeting everybody, of course. But
Hey, just to backtrack to clarify what Brad was saying regarding iMovie. So you can go one way. You can start an iMovie. You can go to Final Cut, but you can't go back.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, one of the things, when you think about Final Cut going to where the puck is going to be, in 2011, it was never thought of as like, what? We're going to get rid of tape? We're going to be working in SSDs. We're going to need this kind of speed. Now it's just completely assumed. And tape is like never heard of. So I would think in a collaboration space, for me, the stuff I'm used to now, and again, just working in the Apple ecosystem, is I can use any device to edit anything. Not edit video, sorry. I'm in Pages, I'm in whatever. I use Notability like crazy to write notes, and I can write notes anywhere. So I can say like, oh, I don't have my iPad, no problem. I'm just going to open up my phone. Oh, I have my computer. I'm going to do Notability on my computer. And it all goes to the same place. I can access everything everywhere. And it seems like that kind of world is what we want to be with video. And I think, Adobe Rush, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but it seems like they were trying to do that, blatantly copy Final Cut 10 and then, make this world that's completely cloud-based, where you can, be working and it uploads to the cloud, and then you're able to edit on any device. And it seems like that'd be the goal. I don't know if that can be the reality.
The crazy thing about Final Cut Pro 10.0 is the fact that they obviously thought we're going to create a soup of media, right? We're going to have a soup of media that all things are going to be able to access. You're going to have iPhone to accessing the soup of media. We're going to have iMovie accessing and Final Cut Pro accessing the soup of media. And essentially the operating system is eventually going to look after that soup of media. And then everyone goes, no, we want libraries. We can't stand the fact that we have to make, sparse disk images and all that kind of stuff. Because essentially what they were thinking was after 10 years, we have a media operating system, or the media part of the Mac operating system is essentially looking after all the clips, looking after all the timelines, and any app can create timelines or clips, and they all combine together, and iMovie and Final Cut Pro, and it's just one big soup, like a Newton-style soup, if you see what I mean, and which is essentially a big media database with different apps running on it. And then what you're talking about in the case of then eventually iPads accessing and iPhones accessing that same super media or different apps. But unfortunately, I think they were pushing it too far with the original structure of Final Cut Pro, and they said, okay, let's create libraries.
So do you guys think that Apple is content with their current audience? Not the numbers, but just who's using their products now?
Are you talking about broad Apple or specifically Final Cut Pro?
No, Final Cut Pro. Sorry, Final Cut Pro. I mean, do you think that Final Cut Pro, the team, whoever's involved with it, they're content with the audience that they have?
I don't think. Well, here's my 2 cents. Why is iJustine the keynote speaker? It's not because they want more Hollywood editors. It's because they understand that there is a gigantic, worldwide, global resurgence of people using video for something other than just making Hollywood movies and TV shows. So I think that keynote choice tells us a little bit about what they're thinking. Are they happy? Are they delighted? Are they delirious that people use it in motion pictures and in network TV and that sort of thing? The other Bill Davis, who's going to be doing the presentation there, I think he's talking about those kind of large infrastructure TV processes. He works with Ken Burns on those things. And so you get that, but I don't think they're just consistently moving us away from the idea that video is what it used to be. The distribution is what it used to be. And they were there 7 years ago when they created 7. They were already thinking more like the world looks now than the way it looked 10 years ago.
Yeah, good point, Bill. I think the other thing too that's telling, my kind of joke about Avid. Apple could buy Avid and no one would even notice. I mean, the money being gone, it isn't that much money. So if Apple really wanted to say, hey, we want to be the big dog in Hollywood, they could just choose to do that. They could just choose to buy Avid and they're done, and just slap an Apple name on it.
My idea a few years ago was for Apple had been working with IBM quite a lot recently, because IBM got lots of vertical integration with all these different industries, like IBM for the oil industry, or IBM for the transportation industry, or probably for the prison industry, for all I know.
I remember that, yeah.
And then the idea would be that they know how to sell them software and solutions, including now. The idea is that if you want to get your iPad or your iPhone working with these big databases, IBM will look after you. So my idea, of course, is that Apple strongly suggests to IBM that they buy Avid, and then they sell Avid video solutions to multinationals, but oddly enough, only on Macs and not PCs. Yeah. And then what happens is the storage and stuff like that is now the hardware storage is just IBM's hardware and storage. It's not this Avid one. And then eventually what happens, of course, is they start switching out Avid for Final Cut Pro for everybody apart from the old editors, because people don't care really. But it's just a name that would help IBM market Mac hardware to high-end multinationals and to governments to do video editing. But then the bait and switch is to say you sell them Avid initially, and then they eventually just use all Final Cut Pro because they'd rather use that.
Oh my gosh, I have this image of all these.
Oh,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, the whole play of Hollywood, right, and what's happening in Culver City and the rest of that stuff, where we know that iTunes is interested in production from a few years now, and they're building this infrastructure and they're investing substantial amounts of money as a content library thing. It may be less Alex's soup and more a content stew, but I see chunks out on the horizon that Apple is linking to that'll eventually turn out to be this smorgasbord of creative content creation, capture, creation, distribution. I don't know about capture. I don't know if they'll ever do a camera, but there are plenty of cameras that feed into the system.
Wait, Bill.
Oh,
right there.
Well played, Brad. That's a good point. Maybe that becomes part of this big stew, the creative content stew, that Apple is positioning themselves for us looking down the road at what it'll
so I spent a lot of years in that Hollywood environment, in the studio system, and getting us at the time to change anything was like prodding. It's like cattle prodding a brontosaurus, because there's hundreds of millions of dollars invested, not just in the talent, but also in the equipment and the facilities. Yes. So I think the change is coming, but it's coming from people like all of you who are on the outside bringing it in, and from people who are saying, no, I'm only going to cut on Final Cut. I don't use Avid, but they want that particular editor, and that's happening more and more. So it's slow, but it is moving. I mean,
and that's the number one reason why the Avid purchase by Blackmagic doesn't seem to make sense to me. Why would Avid want to bring all those Blackmagic people into their corporate culture and become a leap ahead organization? Because isn't that what Blackmagic is? Blackmagic is trying to make leaps, trying to get ahead. Apple, as much as people don't understand them sometimes, makes these leaps and they move ahead. I think 11 years ago, or 7 years ago was a huge leap. So those are the two different development models for a major corporation trying to deal with these global changes in how digital content is part.
So anybody that's in Cupertino, if they're not attending the summit, they can attend the Friday night expo, $40. You get to meet everybody. You get to hang with everybody. They have food for that. So it's only $40. That's a separate ticket if you want to do that.
Alex, where are you? Where are you physically? I'm sorry, Richard, I'm interrupting you. I apologize.
London in England, so it's not.
Oh, okay. All right,
is it like 3 a.m. there? What time is it?
I thought maybe for some reason you were working here. Darn it.
It's 10 to 9, and I got some more work to do this evening, and also to eat. So,
Richard, I'm sorry.
That's okay. One more thing. They keep changing the schedule for the program. They initially, until about 24 hours ago, they had a session in the middle of Friday that was called Apple Feedback for an hour. Apple Feedback. Now
Is it not there?
I was excited about that. They changed. They took it out. Now it might be iJustine or something else. There is some kind of a panel, I think, but they had Apple Feedback. I said, wow.
We
Apple
can get
really changing
back all weekend.
But to have an open session, I was like, wow, what's going on here?
That's interesting.
The afternoon session at the town hall seems quite long. It seems longer than it was last year, and that was including two groups of people having the same presentation. And it's longer than that.
There's a visit to the visitor center.
Oh no, but even after that, it seems to be like a longer session. But anyway.
Well, they have to make us all sign NDAs. It takes a while.
Well, they've done that before. I was at NAB in 2016, and everybody inside the room had to sign the NDA before they.
How many people would you say?
70, 100, something like that. Yeah, it was pretty packed.
Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Can happen.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But I think it'll be more like it has been. Here's the new version. We're going to show you what we got. Don't touch anything. They don't want you to touch anything when you're in the demo room. Don't touch that. Don't touch it because it's not ready yet. So it's still beta.
Well, and I think we've seen since that 2016, because I was also there. I think we've seen that was kind of the start of them starting to open up, like because that didn't leak in 2016, the whole audio rules thing. I think they trusted us more.
Yeah.
And then
speak for yourself.
So they've been opening up a little bit more.
So if you learn anything
Alex is pointing.
So if you learn anything next week, don't tell me, because I want them to tell me at some other time in the future, and trust me. So be trustworthy.
Are you saying if we have to sign an NDA, then don't tell you? Or...
Exactly. Exactly. If you sign an NDA, you can't even tell people you've actually signed the NDA. That's part of the NDA. So you can't even say that you signed the NDA.
You know what astonishes me about that whole thing when we were put on the NDA at that creative thing is that not only did nobody who's in the industry break it, but there were civilians. I mean, there were people who just literally showed up for the session that they put under NDA who had nothing to do with professional video whatsoever. It was like a wedding videographer from Des Moines or something, and they all kept it too. I mean, this was like, people can be trustworthy if you ask them to do something and treat them well.
Well, and also we've all got Apple listening devices in our pockets, so.
Does Siri talk to you? Siri talks to me all the time. I'm having a conversation, and she'll say, "I don't know how to answer that." Like, I didn't ask you, Siri. Oh my goodness!
It's when Siri starts saying don't go any further. I know what you're going to say. Then you're going to start watching.
Really?
I know you signed an NDA, and if you say the next word, I'm going to wipe everything that's associated with this Apple ID, all your family photos and stuff like that, and maybe I'll electrocute you as well to give you a little shock.
So now that we've solved all of the requests for Final Cut Pro, if it is 10.5, Alex, you don't think it's going to be 10.5 next week?
I don't think so, but I think hey, as was it Aaliyah who said age is just a number? The dot release, it's just a number. Who knows what we're going to get? I would say politically it makes more sense for a big version of 10.5 to come out with the Mac Pro, saying now because we've got the Mac Pro, we can produce a new version number. Now the new version number may not have much more than a point release. It's just from a kind of marketing perspective, the version number helps get the press outside our little bubble. It means the Mac press will write about it and stuff like that. Whereas they're not going to write a dot release necessarily, unless it's a very obvious feature that even a tech journalist can understand, but a post-production person can't understand. So
that then they can show us 10.5 and say coming out in 2019.
Yeah.
Well, just remember last year, I mean, the things that they let out, they said you can talk about. I mean, that has been an evolution. They wanted us to. Every year it has been less NDA-ish and more, we're showing you these things, you can go ahead and talk about them. No, you cannot bang on them. And, but 2 years ago, they had all those new iMacs set up and we could just edit on them. So it wasn't like they were, it's been all over the place, how much they disclose and how much they keep quiet.
But we've solved all the requests today.
Yeah, burn your list down, Richard. It's not anymore.
We told Final Cut Pro team how to do all the things. They should have it implemented next week without any problems.
No problem.
Especially collaboration. That's an easy one. That's simple, right?
So just do it. Just make it better.
Just make it better.
I want a nicer blue.
Throw the switch.
What did you say, Brad?
Nicer blue. I want a nicer blue and what better
so
collaboration.
Nice.
Yeah. It's going to be the Richard Taylor list of the one thing that'll make Final Cut Pro. It's the top one list, and the item will be make it better.
Make it better. Consolidate them all down to one request. That'd be perfect.
Make it better. Yeah.
I'm sticking with my traditional request. I just want them to surprise me. I just want them to do something that I have not thought about. And
I'm just happy to have it.
Yeah,
I'm just happy to have it. Years ago when it first came out, it gave me the ability to start working on my own on projects that I could not do. And I was carrying around this little dongle for Avid. Or if I was working in my own facility, I was renting it for $5,000 a month. And it took 3 men to bring it in and set it up. And when Final Cut came along, it changed my whole life. So obviously there's always things you want. But bottom line is, I mean, the combination of absolutely working with Philip and Greg on all the Lumberjack system stuff and Builder and Final Cut Pro. I'm a happy camper. I'm just happy. And I'm so excited. That'll be my first summit.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're glad to see you there.
Has everything had the same experience I have with the last updates? Because for 6 months, I've been just solid as a rock. Things have just been working.
I haven't updated to, what is it?
Mojave.
Mojave yet now.
I have. I've been on Mojave for, a month now, and just everything has just been sailing along.
And you're okay? Because I'm in the middle of 2 big projects. I'm afraid to upgrade.
I'm totally okay. Mojave didn't seem to break anything that I'm doing. It's been smooth. There were a couple of the last 10 point, the last OS thing moving to Mojave screwed around with some of my normal thinking patterns in the OS, but inside 10, once I launched 10, zero problems. That's me. So I know other people would be the same, but
I usually wait to upgrade my OS until there's like a brand new Final Cut. So like 10 point, I waited for High Sierra until 10.4 was out, and then that's when I made the leap.
Brad, don't you have a Mac Mini?
I'm got a Mac Mini coming on the way. So
okay. I was going to ask.
I'm hoping it gets to me. Yeah, hopefully it gets to me before the summit.
Yeah, I was going to ask you
what we
that.
need, with a combination of our iPads, our MacBook Pros, or the Mac Mini, now we need portable, lightweight monitors that can travel with us.
Foldable.
That's what I want. Yeah, something that rolls up into a tube. You stick it in your suitcase and you pull it out, and then you can work.
Somebody was talking about the iPad Pros as monitors and saying they were actually reasonably color accurate. I think we're starting to see people play with those as external monitors.
They have fixed Duet. You can use Duet again.
Right.
For a while there, you couldn't, but I've been using Duet with my iPad Pro.
Yeah.
Or do what I do, which is when I get to a hotel room, I just plug into the HDMI.
Well,
However, I accidentally left
that's smart.
I left my HDMI cable in the Juniper Hotel 2 years ago.
It's still there.
Yeah, maybe I'll get the same room.
Well, you have to get the same room. That's all. Any final thoughts, anybody?
Thank you, Richard.
Can't wait for next
Absolutely.
week.
Yeah.
1 week away, the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit. If you want to find out more, FCPXCreativeSummit.com. They might let you book this late. I presume they will.
And I am sorry that Bill and Alex will not be joining us. It will not be
I
quite the
am
same,
too.
but
Absolutely.
but Serena will be there, and I think she can fill in for both of them.
Yeah, no, I wish.
Well, I'm gonna hopefully we can get you on one of these chats while we're there, Alex and Bill both. We'll get you on one of these.
Well, I mean, obviously, this time in 8 days' time, it's going to be fine for me. So it's a matter of when it's convenient for you guys. So I guess that's when you're wandering around the event. It's going to be a bit late for me. So it'd have to be kind of in the early-ish evening, you see what I mean? Because it's now 9 p.m. for me now.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to start one on Thursday afternoon, but you said you're working any after Thursday?
Yeah, I'll be working.
Well, I'll send you the link. If you can make it, you can make it. That's what that's what I'll be doing.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Richard, tell everybody to look for the two guys and the gal in the buffalo plaid, but primarily Philip and Greg. They're the smartest ones in the room, and they're happy to talk to anybody with
Absolutely.
whatever
They're doing a presentation Friday morning, right?
Yes, and then Mark Spencer is presenting on it, and I'll have a little bit of it in my presentation too, although mine is primarily business oriented, but part of it is using Builder.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bye-bye. What does this button do?
There you go. That's it. Oh, yeah, I think you just ejected Bill. Oh, there we go. All right. We will talk to you all. I'll be broadcasting live from the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit, some behind-the-scenes stuff, whatever I can. And you subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com. Richard Taylor TV is probably the best place. Or join the Final Cut Pro Radio user group on Facebook. That's another place to be up on what's happening at the summit. I'm sure we're going to have an announcement on next Friday. Right, Brad?
Sure. I guess I'm the only one left.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to stop the broadcast. Brad, hang on there just a second. We'll talk. Okay?
All right.
All right, everybody. Talk to you later.